Okay, so we're ready to sort of put this together and everything else, and obviously it's going to be a bit tricky for you to try and see this. What I'm going to do is just give this a bit of green, and then you can see the contrast in the actual part. So what we're going to do, any green will do, because this is just going to act like a primer, or any colour you like. Obviously you don't really need to do this bit, it's just me. Just going to spray some neat green, just so it shows up. Just so, as I said, you're going to be able to see this a little bit easier. Just do these. Okay, so we just poke that out of the way and put the lid on that. I'll sort that out in a moment. Okay, so whilst you've been away, what we've actually done, move that out of the way, we've actually got here, you can probably see them here, we've opened up these little holes into these parts, and we've lessened the height a little bit because they were a little bit up. So we've gone through and we've put some holes in there. Obviously it depends on the diameter of the pipe that you're going to be poking through this one. Some of these are quite big, so I can get some of these for the big ones to run through, and obviously different ones have different size holes in there, just like that, just so they can run through. So what we can actually do now is put this spine slightly together. So obviously what we've got first, we've got number A, which is this one at the front. Okay, and what that's going to do is just going to act and butt up the front, just like so. And because this is styrene sheet, you can do just the same as if it was normal plastic. So we just put a drop in there and a drop down the bottom. Obviously we'll wet paint here. We'll let the capillary action run right the way round. A touch more down here. Now these long sections you can probably see here. You might be able to, we put some holes and we've trimmed out and everything else like that. Depending on which way you want to put this on, obviously as I say, I'm doing this where it's pretty wet, so it makes it quite tricky to sort of get this one all together. But basically we should look for, he says, having rubbed his numbers off, I think this is B, this should all start to clip together. So what we can do, we can just pop it on like this. Okay, what we do, we just move that out of the way just to dry for a second. We can put this together then. So we've got this one that's A, and I'll say, unfortunately I've rubbed off these numbers a little bit. So what we can do, we can slide this one over here. If we've got one standing up, we'd be okay. If we can get it to stand up, that is. Okay, so we've got some A, and just checking through, just trying to work out which one's which. A, I think this is B, so it's 2 and then 1 on its own, which will run over there. B, I'm pretty sure this is a C. I can get them all. Thinking this is probably a D. Okay, and F. Okay, so that's those on just done like this. You can like train track. There again, as I said, we can use a little bit of extra thin just to weld these in a little bit and hold them together. Then what we can do, we can drop them into position, line them up, take care of any little gaps and bits that we've got. But as I say, I know this will want to steady these up. So we just sit those in. As I said, it's one of those things, because obviously there's a couple of variables on how you put all these together. Okay, so if we just move this up. So we've got this situation like this, so we just slide this in the back, and it should slide down the back quite nicely and sit all inside. And these should all fit in. So there we go, that's the spine set just for the moment looking in. So you can glue this down into position if you like to do that now. We're just going to centre it up just a little bit to square it all up because it's laying slightly on its sides and things like that. So we'll make sure all these ribbing sections are stood up and properly aligned and everything like that. So they're in. So that's the main framework, as you can see on there now, and that sort of boxes it all in of actually how it is. Now, depending on the Phantom you're doing will depend on your next section, because what happened was apparently when the J version, which is the version we're doing here, was made up to an S, a lot of this was changed. The hydraulic lines and the fuel lines were all switched over and had new Teflon seals and things like that, and apparently used to leak and be a real problem, and this panel on the top was on and off all the time with them until they got it right and replaced the entire back of this. Also, what we've got on here, I've made up, which is just a little bit of artistic license. We've got here some plasticard, and all I've actually done is slightly round it over just a little bit on these edges, you probably see there. Okay, and the reason is to get this to fit down flush. Now, obviously you've got the fuel cells that run along the back. This is just to give the impression that they're there. So when we've got the wiring and the hoses running all over it, it will give it that right look. So if we just drop these in, you can see what I mean by it. So we're going to fit one in here. Okay, then we've got one on the top up here. Okay, and then one down here. There's slightly different sizes, that's sort of intentional. Okay, so they're going to fit in there like that. Then obviously you've got obviously I'm waiting for these bits to dry up a little bit so I can get it out and handle it. And then we can start doing the refueling pipes. Now we've got this nice big one here, which is, he says grabbing his calipers quickly, which is a piece of 3mm piping, and I've made the holes 3mm right the way down for this one. The one next to it is roughly the same size but only comes 2 down, and then they're slightly smaller on this side. So by bending them round and popping all these in, we should be able to make quite a nice setup. The other one as well, you've got another one which is quite thin, which I might be able to run this one down here. I'll tell you what, we ought to run it from this end because it goes down into the back, but as you can probably see, the effect we're after will run the length of the line right down the back, and then hopefully it will disappear just down the back here. Okay, so we can fit that in. And it's going to run down just like this. So hopefully you're getting the idea of how this is going to run down then, these fuel lines and everything else. And obviously we've got branches coming off of them which will then move over and things like that. But obviously because we're white on white, it's being quite hard to see it. But you get the general gist of how it's all going to run. So if we lift it out, this is a great thing. Now it's drying off, we can use this as a separate piece to put all these fuel lines and various pieces into this. And obviously on the back here of this one we'll detail these up by putting more wiring around these, but basically they've got this first one is the big one which is going to go just in here. So if you wanted to now, you could glue that into place. So we take a little bit of extra thin, just make sure it's square, a bit of extra thin, and let the capillary action pull itself all the way around, as we were saying before. And then by the time, because we've got different heights in here, we're going to do a little bit of dry brushing to weather this one all up and make it look the business. That's what we wanted to do. Get to slide. Here we go, making sure we're all square. We'll put a nice big dollop of this just in here. We'll pop this one in, just like that. There again, extra thin so it blends it in and melts the edges, things like that. Okay. Last one going just in here. Just sit in. Okay, so we've got those in place just like that. Then we can build up the fuel lines and put them in and then slide this in afterwards. So I say we've got a situation where we have a big tube, but it only goes in 2 cells distance. So this back one here is only going to feed in 2, then we're going to have to put a small bend on it and then go down into this tank here. And as I said, they sort of self-feed one to the other, if you can imagine, like a daisy chain effect. So you're going to have to put bends in, and if you look at the photos, the close-up photos, you'll see that we've got big squares, blocks, which obviously got some mechanics. You've got plenty of electrical connections going in here as well, obviously driving various fuel pumps, earthing lines, things like that running all around this area. So they're all various things that we can do to sort of liven and busy this all up. But basically by putting the fuel pipes in, we've got one on the near side, which seems to run the entire distance, is going to run just down here and it's going to run all the way through. I might have to open up a few of these holes. So we just run this one all the way down. Just check it goes all the way through. And say they're a bit tight how they fit. Okay, but this one will run down, so we can actually trim this one at the top here to the right distance it needs to be. So if I do believe this one comes up and it's just going to pop in around about here. So just make a small cut. Great thing with this, you can break it and actually bend it into place. So we have these 3, and as I said, you have a another situation where I think this one only goes 3 or 4 back. There's actually 4 back to about here, and there again this one has a connection on it as well. So if we pop this back in place now, you can immediately see it's sort of livening up and busying up exactly the type of thing we're after. Obviously we can get it all held in place, but already you can see that it's starting to take shape even before we come along and really get going with this, where we actually start to put in all the wiring and the electrics and tiny little bits of plastic which will liven it up. Because these grey areas, green areas you can see down the side, we're going to have all wiring looms are going to run all the way down the side there as they go through. But as I say, it's quite hard to see because it's white on white. That's why I wanted to do the green so you could see it coming through and everything else like that. But that's the basics of how that is just for the moment. The other thing we're doing here, we've got these side ones. Now these side ones again can be made up, because obviously we're going to have wiring going to be going down. That's probably a little bit big. The other thing you can do if you've got it is this thin sprue, which is the evergreen one. You can just basically put down the side in strips of it to look like hydraulic lines and things like that. Then obviously you've got to fill out this ram air filter. But that's the basics of getting that pipe section on the top. I'm going to have a bit of a fiddle with it now for the next few minutes. Just try and get it all lined up, make some joins, see how it's going to go. And I'll talk about putting in the wiring sections and making up wiring looms and how to get this piping, instead of it looking like tubes, into proper sort of piping looking with joints and connectors and things like that. Okay, so you see we've done a little bit more in there. We've got some more piping and various things all going on in here. So what we've actually started to do up the top area here, we've started gluing in the pipes, we've started to join them, we've made joins. You can probably see over here, it's looking clear at the moment. By the time it's painted it'll be a nice join. And working our way back, we've also started to add some thinner strips and the wiring and everything's going on there. Now that on the back here, we've got a lot of work to do back here to sort these out. But what I want to do for the moment is just talk to you about wiring looms and things like that, to how to liven it up, to stop it looking like, you know, perhaps something like this, just like a piece of rod or a piece of plastic and things like that. First of all, wiring. As we said before, the great thing about wiring is you can use some of this stuff. This is Plus Models lead wire. Now the great thing about this is you can twist it to any type of shape that you sort of need, and you can bend it and all the rest of it. So actually what we got going on down here we've got here, you can probably see, about 6 strands of wire, okay, just like this, and all we've done is roughly scrunch it together, and this makes our wiring loom just like that. Still not exactly very exciting when you see it like that, because obviously it needs the cable ties and the things that will bring it all together. So the way of doing that is using something like this. Now this is jammy dog tape. Now it's very, very thin. The great thing about this is like 1mm thick, so you don't have to trim it down, and you can make little bunches with it. I've had these rolls now for years, absolute years now, so they do come in very, very handy. So just cut yourself a piece off, something like this. Okay, now it's not an issue you want to do too much of wrapping it round and things like that. I wouldn't worry about that too much. But if we start up here, if I show you the way I do it, all I do it is place it on, okay, put it on just like so, okay, and then just wrap it round. He says, trying to get it to stick, and then in on itself, okay, just like that. I'll bring you in nice and close to this. So you have it on there just like there. Okay, then taking some nice sharp scissors, okay, we can just snip off the back, okay, and that way we can use it. And what we can do is actually this bit here, we can glue that bit of tape to whatever we want to go to. Okay, so it's just dead simple, just like that. We'll do it one more. So we just pop a little bit off. Okay, then depending on your scale would depend on how many of these you want on your actual model. Okay, so just the same thing again. Okay, it's on, then you can snip. And if you want to be quite frugal, you should be able to use your offcuts in on the next one, and so forth and so on as you move across your model. Okay, so if we just put another one in here, we're just trying to keep it all together. Okay, but they're on there like that. Then obviously you can trim these up to however you actually want them. Okay, so by snipping those very, very close, another little technique you can do is just put a tiny, tiny little bit of, get that camera to lock in, of super glue just in on the end of one of these, and just touch it in, and it'll hold it all in place and stop it pinging it off. But it makes a very nice, realistic wiring loom. Now, I've only loosely bunched this together because we're doing it in sort of 1/32 scale. If I was doing something 1/48, I might twist it a little bit tighter together. But by doing something like that all the way along, and then what we can do, you can come along with our phantom like this, okay, and we can put this in and lay it down, and it'll look like a very convincing wiring loom running through. Then obviously you can take little spurs off and run it around everywhere as you would in real life, and just run it like that. So that's one little technique. Do excuse me, still getting over the cold. Okay, the other thing you can do, and you might be able to see a little bit of it going on just down in here. Okay, down in here, I'm going to use a bit of tweezers. You might be able to see I've got a couple of parts. We do it in here. You see a couple of strips of very, very thin styrene. Now this is 0.6mm and 0.4mm wide. There again, you can use it for wiring, hoses, things like that. And I've just set them in there just for the moment, just to have a look around, see how it'll look, see if it's going to look in scale. There again, not much to it when you're dealing with piping and things like that, so you need to liven it up. So what you can do, if you're doing quite a large pipe, something like this, you can actually come along with, again, jammy dog tape, because the reason I like this stuff is it pre-cut in your thickness that you're going to need. Okay, so we just cut off the end a bit, grab ourselves a piece, okay, and that way you can just wrap it round just like this, and that way it will give you a convincing join. Perhaps it runs through. Then obviously you can come along with silver and put silvers around it. Another little technique you can do if you want to make something that looks like ties, if we just bring this one in nice and close so you can see, so we've got it on here, you can actually use lead wire, okay, and bring them across like this, to make it look like, and two of them on there, sort of in this position on the other, and it will make it look like it's got the rings actually holding it down, but it will look like a join on a pipe. Then obviously you can make it thicker or thinner as you went by just doing it on a few areas. If we do a slightly thicker join here, if we move it up here, okay, and then keeping the tape right over the top, we can go along and it looks like we've got joins. And then obviously at the moment we're just in the raw form, but by the time we've got them painted, and obviously you can do these black as if they're rubber or red as seals and things like that, you can work along and do them just like that. Exactly the same. Obviously bigger things like this type of thing you can get away with big scales. Little things we'll use thinner tape. So here we've got some, I think this is 1.5mm tape. So we'll just grab a little piece of this. But you can come along then with your various sizes and put these on. Okay, just when you're wrapping them around, try and keep them all sort of square. And there we go. That's one on a thinner pipe. And then obviously you can go right the way down as we were doing it before. Use the 0.5 tape we've got here, he says, just looking for the end. Okay, let's cut ourselves a bigger bit to start it wrapping. You can even use it on the smallest of scales, and just trying to get it to wrap on is always a bit of a problem to start with, but once you got it on, you should be able to wind it on a little bit, trim off your excess. Okay, and we've even got it on little tiny pipes just like this, and this will hopefully give us the same effect of what we're getting with the other one, where we've got obviously the little ties running all the way down, and it makes it look like the joins are very natural and things like that. Don't be too worried about using super glue. The great thing with super glue is you can pop these in, come along with a little bit of kicker. I've got the activator or kicker as they call it, give it a squirt, it will lock it in place and you can move on to the next piece and work our way on. So what we're going to do now, by using these techniques of putting these strips on, we can come along and start breaking up this pipe work that's all down the back here, which is looking great, but at the moment it's just looking like big strips of plastic running down there. It's one of those things, it's all going to come alive when we're in. What I've actually done there is secured this all in. This framework is all in there properly now, okay, and I've started gluing in the actual pipes to hold them in place so they're not going to go anywhere and everything else like that. So what we're going to do, get on with the wiring, have a look at our references, see how the wires are running around like that, and then once we've got that on, we can then start getting it all painted up and things like that, and start picking out the detail and finishing off this top area. Okay then, so as you can probably see, we're moving along nicely, and we're just adding pipe and livening it all up as we go around. We're doing some more now down the back and everything else, but what we can do now is sort of stop at this point, because we're happy how that is, because obviously a lot of the other wiring we're going to do afterwards, we can do after it's been painted, so we need to paint that, pick out all the little details and everything else, and then we can sort of go along with all the different wires and everything else. Thing is, we put it all in now, we're going to have to repaint the lot, and a lot of them are obviously going to be wire colours, and we've got lots of wire and everything else. We use some styrene sheets and thin stuff, I'll show you a little bit later on, to cover up this back bit a little bit, because it seems to be pretty much covered the way the fretwork works, and that's why we haven't put any formers back there, so we'll show you that a little bit afterwards. But obviously I'm really happy now. We've been around and we've really livened up a lot of this pipe working. You can probably see we've gone in there, got the crossovers for the fuel transfers to the tanks and things like that, so we're doing really, really nice. Now the next one, you can probably see it here, is obviously filling in this gap under here, which we obviously opened up, and we've got this top one as well. The easiest way to do the bottom one, you can see in here, we've actually got this styrene sheet scrap. This is the one that's going to come in from the underside, and it's going to be the backing for it and stick in like this. Okay, so actually what we've got here, I don't have styrene sheet, I tend to use the big sort of thicker stuff. This is millimeters, this one is. If we just turn on our digital calipers here, we can actually see this one here is 1 mil thick. So it's quite a handy size for doing a lot of things. It's thick enough to be able to be quite strength, and the other way it's thick enough to be able to sort of not melt when you put glues near it, especially using the Tamiya Extra Thin. So all we're going to do is cut a strip out about 1 millimeter. So we're just cutting that. Okay. Now this particular section we're doing here, you can probably see on the camera work, is these photos down here. Okay, so we're putting in all this pipe work that's going to run along the side. This front one we're not doing so much, but this is the business one that I'm more interested in. This bit up here is this over there. The other panels have been taken off, are the ones below here. So you get an idea. Obviously different coloured piping, different aircraft. Obviously some of them have different older piping, perhaps not used anymore, hasn't been removed. So that's why there is a difference in them. But that's really what we're working on now. So as I said, I've just roughly sketched out from the outside to the inside areas of roughly what we've got on the go here. So we've got this, which is 1mm now by obviously 1mm. Okay, so what we're going to do is literally just going to come along and cut these to lengths so we can fit these. It's really hard to see this because obviously the colour of the styrene sheet is that very similar to what we've got here. But we've got this, and what we're going to do is glue them on top. So we're just going to snip these down. Okay. So we need 5 of these. What have we got? 4. We're going to need a little bit more in a moment. So, okay. This particular one we're going to be doing, as I said, is going to be sort of filling in this hole here. So what we need to do is we'll start it at the back, just going along with a little bit of extra thin, just like this. The reason for doing this, it'll stick to it. Okay, so we can just roughly work out a couple of bars running along. Okay, and then we can just stick these on. Obviously we want them to stand upright as much as possible, so if you use plastic art, try and keep it as square as you can. So you might have to push it up a little bit afterwards, but that's those going on like that, as you can see just in there. Okay, so we'll just pop this last one on here. Now what we're going to do, we're going to put a groove in a moment, okay, on these by using a saw, cutting across when these are dry, cutting down, because obviously the thickness of the blade, and then when you can come along here, I've got some 0.6 hose, okay, and we can just lay it in the grooves and build it up so it looks like that. And in good old fashioned, here's one I did earlier, just like this. Okay, so there it is all there. You can see the brown from the background. Okay, and then there again, this is going to be similar to what we were saying before. This one is just going to come along. Okay, and it's going to fit then just in here like this, showing our pipe work through from the other side. Quite straightforward. And then obviously same thing again, we're going to add wiring and various bits and pieces like that separately afterwards, and in that way we don't have to paint them, because obviously the same thing with these. But that gives us our effect we were looking at just on there. So when you see it from the side like that, it doesn't look too far away from what we were trying to achieve in here. In this photo here, just like that. Okay, so that's it. There again, as I say, it will come more to life once we've painted it up and we've gone round and detailed it with different colour glues and everything else, just like that. But there we go, that's it really livening up and starting to take shape now. We've got to open up other panels, as we know, down the back here, but I wanted to get these done, that way we can cover them up, and then obviously we can detail them up at a later date with all the different painting and everything else. But it gives us the work area is done, so it can be covered. And as I said, for this one, I've still got to thin the inside, but this will fit on the top. You know, it's going to go right on the top again, and it will fit in. And so I've got to cut out these large lumps down the back, because obviously nothing there. But we can thin this out, and it will just sit right the way over the top, and then so we can do a nice reveal and expose all that nice pipe work and everything else. But that's the basics of doing that pipe work for the moment. We're going to come back and obviously liven it up. I'm going to do the other side to this one that we're doing there, get that one finished off and open up that other hole. As soon as we've got those bits done, we can just open up a few of the other little panels, doing roughly the same way that we want to open up as well, and then we can move on to doing work on the cockpit and actually working through the build of actually getting the lighting and the electrics and all the other bits and pieces, and have a look at some of the other areas we're going to open up and super detail.